Chapter 358. Xia Wanjun inexplicably felt a little thirsty. He looked at the woman in the video who took a sip of wine and closed her eyes to savor it with a satisfied expression. His gaze uncontrollably landed on her red and full lips. There were some water stains on her lips, and they emitted a seductive color under the light. He couldn't help but want to reach out and touch them, or taste them. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes. She seemed to have thought of something, and a smile appeared on her lips. She drank the remaining wine in the glass in one gulp. A strand of wine flowed down from the corner of her mouth, passing by her beautiful neck and her delicate collarbone. Finally, it disappeared into the fragrance. Boom! Xia Wanjun only felt a fire burning in his body. He crossed his legs and changed his sitting position. His eyes were like an eagle's as he stared at the woman in the video. If someone else was here, they would definitely be frightened by the excitement in his eyes. Was this still the indifferent fourth master Xia? If one took a closer look, one would be able to see the determination hidden in the depths of his eyes. Gu Xingyin estimated that it was enough for today. She didn't continue to provoke him. She got up and walked into the room. Xia Wanjun closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He leaned back in the chair quietly. No one knew what he was thinking. He had also installed a camera in Gu Xingyin's room. This time he didn't look at her. He was afraid that if he couldn't control himself, he would drive directly to her house. Xia Wanjun was in a dilemma. He slowly calmed down the heat in his body. Gu Xingyin was still taking a bath alone. She knew that Xia Wanjun was secretly looking at her. Just now, she deliberately let him see her like that. Since he dared to install a camera in her house, he had to be prepared to ask for trouble. She was very confident that Xia Wanjun could only solve the fire she had ignited. A few more days passed. Gu Xingyin was busy with company affairs every day. She paid attention to Wang Zhenjin and occasionally flirted with Xia Wanjun playfully. President, Xia Group's banquet invitation. Julie placed a gorgeous gold-stamped invitation on Gu Xingyin's desk. Gu Xingyin glanced at it. It was the engagement party of the daughter of one of the directors of the Xia family. Help me prepare the dress, Gu Xingyin said calmly. Julie was a versatile assistant. Aside from work, she was also in charge of Long Tianruo's daily life. Julie agreed without any surprise. Obviously, this was not the first time she had done this. The original Long Tianruo wasn't a person who would spend too much time on such things. What's more, Julie's aesthetic also met Gu Xingyin's requirements. Soon the day of the banquet arrived. When Gu Xingyin's car arrived at the hotel, it was already packed with cars. If there were car enthusiasts here, they would probably be excited for a long time. Most of the cars here were luxury cars that were rarely seen. As soon as Gu Xingyin got out of the car, she heard the sound of shutters. She walked forward under the guidance of the waiter, without changing her expression. At this time, most of the media waiting outside didn't have the qualification to enter. They could only wait outside and take a few photos of the participants for tomorrow's content. The media with a real background had all been invited to the inner area in a proper manner. As the young master of the Xia family, Xia Ziqing played the role of the host to entertain the distinguished guests. When Long Tianruo entered, he felt something and looked over there. Chapter 359. It wasn't just Xia Ziqing. The moment Gu Xingyin walked in, almost everyone's attention was drawn to her. It had to be said that Julie really had good taste. The silver-white strapless dress was completely tailor-made for Long Tianruo's figure, perfectly outlining her beautiful curves. Under the light, her milky white skin looked even more eye-catching than the dress. The hollowed-out back design revealed a large part of her porcelain white skin. Xia Ziqing was sure that at least 80% of the men present had their eyes glued to Gu Xingyin. He was a little depressed. Someone was even more depressed than him. Xia Wanjun narrowed his eyes and looked at a certain woman in the crowd who was shining brightly. He waved to the person next to him. The person next to him was a little surprised, but he still followed the order and walked down. At this moment, the female lead of the engagement party had already come out. Gu Xingyin deliberately took a look at her. She was a very beautiful young lady. One look, and one could tell that she had been pampered since she was young. How a person's life was could always be seen from her face. This young lady of the Xia family was clearly brought up in a honey jar. Her eyes were full of arrogance and haughtiness. However, at this age, Gu Xingyin secretly thought that she had just reached adulthood. Tianrua. Xia Ziqing finally finished greeting all the guests around him, and came to Gu Xingyin's side. Mr. Xia. Gu Xingyin nodded to him lightly and greeted him. She didn't want to complicate matters in the Xia family's territory today. Hearing her address Xia Ziqing, his face darkened. Tianrua, do you have to be so estranged with me? After all, we used to. Gu Xingyin interrupted him. Since Mr. Xia also knows that it was in the past, there are some things that are in the past. Don't mention it again. Gu Xingyin felt that if Long Tianrua were to count the worst decisions she had made over the years, dating Xia Ziqing would definitely be on the list. Xia Ziqing's expression changed, but he immediately thought of something and revealed a gentle smile. Tianrua, I know you have feelings for me. You were the one who saved me that day, weren't you? I know that I hurt your feelings in the past. Don't worry, I will definitely. Gu Xingyin could not bear it any longer. She took a glass of wine from a passing waiter's tray and put it in his hand, finally interrupting his chatter. Gu Xingyin looked at Xia Ziqing without a ripple in her eyes. Her words were as cold as her expression. I don't know where you get your good sense of yourself from, but I'm telling you once again, and for the last time. Xia Ziqing, Long Tianrua, don't like you at all. The reason why I saved you last time was because of the cooperation between the Long and Xia families. Please don't think too highly of yourself. I Long Tianrua and you Xia Ziqing. It will never be possible. When Xia Wanjun walked to this corner, he happened to hear Gu Xingyin's last words. His gloomy mood when he saw the two of them whispering to each other in private instantly turned for the better. Ziqing. He glanced at Xia Ziqing's pale face and spoke indifferently. Xia Ziqing instantly came back to his senses. When he saw Xia Wanjun, his entire body tensed up. Fourth uncle. Xia Wanjun raised his head slightly towards the main character of the banquet. They're too busy over there. Go help them. Chapter 360. When Xia Ziqing saw Xia Wanjun, it was as if he had seen a monster. He quickly glanced at Gu Xingyin, then lowered his head and left. This fourth uncle of his was a transcendent existence in the Xia family. Even the high and mighty elders of the Xia family did not dare to breathe loudly in front of this fourth master Xia, much less a young master from a side branch like him. In fact, it wasn't just Xia Ziqing, but the entire Xia family was trembling with fear when facing Xia Wanjun. This god of death was a master who wouldn't hesitate to kill people who dared to provoke him. Long Tianrua raised his eyebrows in surprise. So it's the famous fourth master Xia. Tianrua is very lucky to have the fourth master personally come to discuss business. Xia Ziqing called Xia Wanjun his fourth uncle. In the entire Xia family, there was only one person who could be called fourth master. If he continued to play dumb, he would be a fool. Xia Wanjun smiled gently. I've always attached great importance to the cooperation with the Long family. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt a little cold. She unconsciously rubbed her arm with her fingers. Xia Wanjun didn't miss this detail. Tianrua, are you cold? Gu Xingyin looked at him strangely. This man's expression was normal, as if he didn't find it strange to be called Tianrua. If she emphasized anything with him like this, it would seem petty. She nodded. It does seem a little cold. Xia Wanjun's eyes revealed a trace of a smile. He waved his hand and said a few words to the attendant beside him. The attendant quickly bowed his head and left. The two stood quietly in the corner, chatting intermittently. They didn't feel awkward at all. In other people's eyes, the meaning behind this was incredible. Everyone knew that the Xia family's fourth master had always liked peace and quiet, and was obsessed with cleanliness. It was already strange that he could come to such an occasion, but he actually chatted with someone for so long. Those people looked at Long Tianrua meaningfully. No wonder he was the number one person of the younger generation. He could even handle someone like the Xia family's fourth master. There were also many people who looked at the two with ambiguous gazes. One had to admit that Xia Wanjun and Long Tianrua were a perfect couple. Quite a number of people were thinking, could it be that fourth master Xia, who was rumored to not be close to women, finally had feelings for her this time? The waiter returned quickly with a snow-white plush shawl in his hand. Xia Wanjun personally reached out to take the shawl from his hand and draped it over Gu Xingyin. He draped the shawl over Gu Xingyin's shoulders from behind, which was equivalent to pulling her into his embrace from behind. The familiar scent instantly surrounded Gu Xingyin. She almost lost control and leaned into the man's arms subconsciously. Xia Wanjun, on the other hand, quite enjoyed this feeling. When he wrapped his arms around Gu Xingyin's shoulders from behind, an impulse that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. It made him want to tighten his arms and take this person into his embrace. In the end, he resisted it with great willpower. He reluctantly withdrew his hands and took a step back, walking back to his previous position. Very beautiful. He looked at Gu Xingyin and praised. He said this with sincerity. Long Tianruo's facial features were already imposing and sharp. Now with the rabbit fur shawl, she looked even more luxurious. Thank you, fourth master. Gu Xingyin said with a smile as she wrapped the shawl around her and felt the warmth on her body. Xia Wanjun was satisfied with another sentence in his heart. This way, those hateful gazes won't always be on you. Chapter 361. After the Xia family's banquet, gossip about fourth master Xia and Long corporations, Xiao Long Tianruo began to circulate in the upper-class circle of a city. Coincidentally, neither side had any intention of standing up to refute the rumors, and the gossip became more and more intense. She didn't know if Xia Wanjun had done something inside, but Xia Ziqing never came out to disturb her again. However, Gu Xingyin looked at the two people pulling on the road and felt helpless. The plot was indeed powerful. Without that life-saving grace, Wang Zhenjin and Xia Ziqing could still be together. It looked like Xia Ziqing accidentally bumped into Wang Zhenjin. Looking at Wang Zhenjin's lively appearance, she was probably fine. The two of them started arguing because of this. Gu Xingyin could only think of the most vulgar scene. The rich young man was arrogant and made a mistake by hitting someone with his money. The commoner woman was proud and unyielding, fighting for her dignity. Based on the plot of this world, Xia Ziqing would be attracted to a different girl like Wang Zhenjin, and then they would have all kinds of misunderstandings. After all the love and hate, the two would live happily together, in your dreams. Gu Xingyin sneered. I won't let you have your way. She watched coldly from the side. In the end, the two seemed to have a big fight. Xia Ziqing threw a check and left angrily. Wang Zhenjin squatted on the ground and cried alone. There were many passers-by pointing at her. She thought for a moment, got out of the car, and walked to Wang Zhenjin's side. Are you okay? She bent down and asked. Wang Zhenjin was crying her heart out when she heard Gu Xingyin's greeting. She instinctively raised her head and looked at Gu Xingyin. With one look, she was so shocked that she even forgot to cry. You, Xiao. Wang Zhenjin blinked and glanced at her. She immediately remembered that she was no longer an employee of Long Corporation. She couldn't help but blush and lower her head. Gu Xingyin handed her a wet tissue and said, Wipe your face. Your makeup is all smudged from crying. Hearing her say this, Wang Zhenjin finally remembered her current image. She hurriedly took the towel and wiped her face. Thank you, President. Miss Long, Wang Zhenjin whispered. You're welcome. I was just passing by. After all, you are my former employee. Gu Xingyin's tone was gentle. President, you actually know me? Wang Zhenjin was surprised and shouted out the previous address. Gu Xingyin nodded calmly. I remember that we've met before. Once at the elevator. Wang Zhenjin did not expect that Gu Xingyin would still remember their meeting after such a long time. The CEO was not as cold as the rumors made her out to be. She lowered her head and thought. Are you going home? Gu Xingyin looked at the bags scattered all over the floor. There were clothes and some snacks inside. Obviously, Wang Zhenjin had just returned from shopping. Wang Zhenjin nodded. I'm going to take the subway. Gu Xingyin thought for a while. Why don't I send you back? It's fate that we met. Wang Zhenjin certainly refused. However, Gu Xingyin looked serious. She seemed to see the CEO boss in the company again. Wang Zhenjin obediently got in the car. Why are you here, President? Wang Zhenjin was a little restless in the passenger seat. She tried to find a topic to talk about. Gu Xingyin thought, of course. I knew that you two met and rushed over. She said indifferently. I just remembered that I wanted to get something here. Chapter 362. The two of them stopped talking. Gu Xingyin paused and said, I saw it. You'd better keep the check, and don't think about anything else. Wang Zhenjin's eyes turned red when she heard this. She glared at Gu Xingyin and said, I didn't expect you to be such a person. Are all rich people like you think like this? Can everything be solved with money? He owes me an apology. Gu Xingyin was not surprised to hear such words. She didn't change her face or get angry when Wang Zhenjin criticized her like this. She just continued to talk to her calmly. Let me think about it. He hit you. What can you do? Call the police. He didn't hurt you and compensated you with a lot of money. Even in the eyes of the police, you're even. Do you want to go to him alone to settle the score? Let's not talk about whether you can find him. If you find him, and he ignores you, what are you going to do? Feeling Gu Xingyin's gaze, Wang Zhenjin blushed and said, I'll reason with him. Gu Xingyin chuckled. Long Tianrua had a cold personality. When she was in the company, even Julie had hardly seen her smile, let alone Wang Zhenjin. Her smile was truly like an extremely gorgeous and luxurious peony in full bloom, bright and beautiful beyond compare. Wang Zhenjin was stunned, and the anger in her heart dissipated a lot. Gu Xingyin stopped smiling and continued to say, Do you think a person like him will reason with you? Wang Zhenjin was speechless. She was angry at that time. She just wanted to find someone to vent her anger. She didn't think so much. Gu Xingyin saw that it was enough and added, To be honest, a person like Xia Ziqing is not worthy of your attention. You're angry here, but he doesn't remember you at all. He's happy and carefree as usual. Why bother? Wang Zhenjin suddenly said, Miss Long, do you know him? Gu Xingyin replied lightly, Yes, he's my ex-boyfriend. Wang Zhenjin was speechless. Gu Xingyin looked at her expression and said, What's wrong? Do you think someone like me doesn't need a boyfriend? Wang Zhenjin quickly shook her head and blushed. To be honest, she had never imagined the president to be in love. In her heart, and in the hearts of all the employees of Long Corporation, Long Tianrua was omnipotent. What kind of man could be worthy of such a person? At least, that Xia Ziqing guy didn't seem to be worthy of her. That's right. I don't think he's good enough for me either. Gu Xingyin's face was filled with such an expression. Only then did Wang Zhenjin realize that she had actually said those words. However, what surprised her was Gu Xingyin's words. She had never seen such a confident and matter-of-fact woman. That was true. This woman was the CEO of such a large corporation. She possessed wealth that ordinary people would never dare to dream of in their entire lives. She was indeed qualified. Don't overthink it. I said that he is not good enough for me. It has nothing to do with his condition, Gu Xingyin said. Wang Zhenjin looked at her in confusion. Gu Xingyin smiled coldly. A man who has a girlfriend and is entangled with all kinds of women, while in love is still a scumbag no matter how good his condition is, isn't it? Her understatement was no less than a heavy bomb in Wang Zhenjin's ears. The president was actually cheated on by someone? How could such an outstanding woman not be able to keep her love? At this moment, Wang Zhenjin's impression of Gu Xingyin was unprecedentedly good. On the contrary, there was only disgust left for that scumbag Xia Ziqing who fooled around. Chapter 363. Soon, they arrived at Wang Zhenjin's place. Gu Xingyin declined Wang Zhenjin's invitation to have a cup of tea upstairs. She said that she had something to do later and drove away. The system said, Host, you're amazing. Gu Xingyin chuckled. Wang Zhenjin is such a naive girl. If I can't handle her, then all the missions I've done would have been in vain. After their conversation, Wang Zhenjin had basically given up on the idea of looking for trouble with Xia Ziqing. If Wang Zhenjin didn't take the initiative to look for him, Xia Ziqing wouldn't have any impression of Wang Zhenjin. She didn't believe that the two of them could still get together. Gu Xingyin went home, but she didn't expect to hear the system's warning just as she stopped her car. Host, be careful. There are people here. People? Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. However, it was impossible for outsiders to come to Long Tianrua's private villa at this time. Besides, even if someone came to visit, they wouldn't hide in the underground garage. Gu Xingyin took out her phone. Sure enough, the signal was blocked. She quietly opened the car door. If she delayed any longer, The people outside would be suspicious. The moment she got out of the car, she suddenly turned around and dodged a hand knife from behind. Eh! A surprised voice came from behind her. It seemed that the person was surprised by his own miss. Gu Xingyin smiled coldly. Just as well. She had never had a chance to test her skills in this world. The nimble but swift woman shuttled between the burly men. The burly men didn't take her seriously at first, but Gu Xingyin's words piqued their interest. Crack! Gu Xingyin dislocated one of the men's shoulder joints without batting an eyelid. That burly man was also very powerful. He actually managed to endure this kind of pain. The others looked at each other and knew that they had underestimated this young girl's strength. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt an alarm in her heart. She heard the sound of something breaking through the air. She fell to the ground to avoid being hit. But it was still a little too late. A sharp pain came from her left calf. And Gu Xingyin's world suddenly became hazy. Someone walked up and took a look. She fainted. I didn't expect her to be so powerful. Quick, let's get out of here. Xiao Wanjun turned on the video out of habit, but he didn't see the familiar figure. Why isn't he back yet? Xiao Wanjun frowned. His heart was filled with displeasure. Didn't she know how to take care of her own body? Bored, he began to flip through the pages. Suddenly, his gaze focused on a certain spot, and a storm quietly gathered in his eyes. He clearly saw that Gu Xingyin had already driven into the garage an hour ago, but he did not see her come out. He immediately pulled up all the surveillance cameras and called someone to come in. Fourth Master. It was still the burly man who had always been by his side. Summer Wolf. Go investigate the whereabouts of Long Tianrua for me personally. Xiao Wanjuan's voice was soft, but Xiao Lang's expression turned solemn. He had been Fourth Master's subordinate for more than 10 years. Naturally, he could hear the rage hidden under his calm voice. Xiao Wanjuan's gaze was fixed on the 4 figures who had snuck into the Long family's villa. His gaze was as cold as ice. When Gu Xingyin woke up, she only felt that her whole body was sore and weak. System. She habitually called out to the system that had been by her side. Chapter 364. Host, I'm here. The system's calm voice came. Where am I now? The system replied. The host is suspected to be kidnapped. Gu Xingyin moved and found that she felt nothing but soreness all over her body. Then the shot she was shot before was probably an anesthetic. Help me check the nearby terrain, and tell me how many people are guarding outside. The system soon gave the answer. The host is in the territory of the Xiao family in City A. There are more than 30 strong men in the independent manor where the host is. Among them, 20 are armed. Gu Xingyin was speechless. The Xiao family was also one of the underworld forces. However, the Xiao family and the Long family had always minded their own business. What was the motive for attacking her this time? Gu Xingyin suddenly remembered that the Xiao family and the Xia family had always been sworn enemies. Could it be because of the recent rumor? Only in this way could it be explained. It seemed that the Xiao family really thought that she had a close relationship with Xiao Wanjun and took her as a hostage. At this moment, someone pushed the door open and came in. Gu Xingyin looked over and found that it was an old man in his 50s wearing a dark red tang suit. Gu Xingyin recognized him, asking, Old Master Xiao, may I know what brings you here? Xiao Xingxiong didn't expect that Gu Xingyin could be so calm in this situation. However, he didn't answer Gu Xingyin's question. Instead, he said, The little girl of the Long family is really a beauty. No wonder. He didn't finish his words, but Gu Xingyin understood. Sure enough, it was related to Xiao Wanjun. Xiao Xingxiong waved his hand behind him. One of his men came over with a syringe in his hand. Gu Xingyin's face suddenly became cold. She looked straight at him. What do you want? Xiao Xingxiong smiled kindly. Miss Long, don't panic. It's just some medicine to calm people down. Don't worry. It's not something addictive. As he spoke, the syringe in his subordinate's hand slowly pierced Gu Xingyin's arm. Gu Xingyin once again could not resist the invasion of darkness and fell into a deep sleep. The smile on Xiao Xingxiong's face disappeared without a trace. He ordered his subordinate beside him. Go, record a video for Fourth Master Xia. Let him see how his woman is now. However, his subordinate did not reply. Xiao Xingxiong felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to turn around, He heard a sound that made his body tremble. No need, I'm already here. Xiao Xingxiong's body stiffened for a moment. He turned his head and saw Xiao Wanjun standing at the door. He was still the same, wearing a meticulous black suit. There was not a single trace of anger on him. Not even a single strand of his hair was out of place. Only Xiao Xingxiong himself knew how tightly guarded this manor was, and how much effort it would take to enter. However, at this moment, all this could only show how terrifying Xiao Wanjun was. Xiao Xingxiong suddenly took out his pistol and pointed it at Gu Xingyin behind him. He looked at Xiao Wanjun. Fourth Master Xia, you really live up to your reputation. I admire you. Xiao Wanjun's expression did not change. What do you want? Xiao Xingxiong laughed. Fourth Master Xia is really straightforward. I'm not as strong as you, so I admit defeat. Fourth Master Xia only needs to promise not to cause trouble for me. I'll pack up and leave the country within a day. I promise I won't disturb Fourth Master Xia in the future. He was a self-aware person. He knew that after the incident, it was already the best result that he could keep his life. Chapter 365. Xiao Wanjun moved his lips. I can agree to your request, but... Xiao Xingxiong felt a sharp pain in his arm that was holding the gun. His arm went numb, and the gun in his hand fell to the ground. At the same time, he heard a familiar voice. But he agreed, but I didn't. Xiao Xingxiong looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing in front of him in disbelief. How is it possible? You were injected with medicine. You should be lying in bed unconscious, right? Gu Xingyin finished his words. Unfortunately, your subordinate might have bought a fake product from somewhere. Gu Xingyin's words made Xiao Xingxiong want to vomit blood. The gun on the ground had been taken away by Xiao Wanjun's subordinate. Gu Xingyin knew that she had nothing to do with the rest. She ignored Xiao Xingxiong, who was sitting on the ground in a daze, and walked to the man at the door. Xiao Wanjun watched as she leisurely walked to his side, and then collapsed onto the ground. He quickly held the woman beside him, and there was a rare hint of urgency in his tone. He said to the person beside him, "You deal with this." Then he picked up Gu Xingyin and left in a hurry. When Gu Xingyin opened her eyes again, she saw the man sitting by the window at first glance. Xiao Wanjun noticed that she had woken up. He got up and walked over. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? He came back with Gu Xingyin in his arms and informed the family doctor. The result was that she had been injected with medicine that would make her unconscious, and there was nothing serious. However, he was still worried. He had to ask for the answer himself. Gu Xingyin shook her head and got up. She was still a little weak, but there was nothing serious. Where are you going? Xiao Wanjun saw Gu Xingyin get up and put on her shoes and asked. Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Going home, of course. She thought for a moment and said, This time, I won't thank Fourth Master. After all, this unexpected disaster was brought upon me by Fourth Master. Xiao Wanjun looked at her impatient appearance and suddenly sneered. Unexpected disaster? He suddenly stood up and approached Gu Xingyin step by step until they could hear each other's breathing. Now, everyone in City A thinks that our relationship is not simple. What's the use of leaving in such a hurry? A faint blush appeared on Gu Xingyin's face. It was a sign of anger. If Fourth Master wants to clarify things, it's just a matter of a word. Xiao Wanjun looked at her face close to his and suddenly smiled. Why should I clarify? Gu Xingyin took a step back and looked at him coldly. Then, Mr. C, is it fun to play with me and everyone? She paused for a moment before continuing. Or perhaps I Long Tianrua have offended Fourth Master in some way. Don't use such a soft knife to deal with people. If it was the real Long Tianrua, she would be innocent in such a thing. It was not easy to be Fourth Master Xiao's woman. Xiao Wanjun had made countless enemies in his life. His woman was destined to be attacked openly and secretly. Xiao Wanjun looked at the cold face of the woman in front of him, and suddenly became serious. Then, what if I'm serious? Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Xiao Wanjun repeated, What if I'm serious about making you my woman? Chapter 366. Gu Xingyin looked a little confused, as if she didn't understand what Xiao Wanjun meant. But Xiao Wanjun didn't give her any chance to escape. He looked at Gu Xingyin and said word by word. I, Xia Wanjun, have fallen in love with you, Long Tianrua. So it's not a rumor. You're destined to be my woman. System. Host, your lover is getting more and more domineering. Gu Xingyin. Shut up, I'm the domineering CEO. System. Long Tianrua looked at the confident man and smiled gently. Fourth Master Xia. Do you know that no matter how powerful you are, there are some things in this world that can't be exchanged with power? Xia Wanjun also smiled gently. I don't know if it can be exchanged or not. I only know that I, Xia Wanjun, have never failed to get what I want. Long Tianrua looked at him. Then, Fourth Master, do you want to force me? Or do you want my heart? Xia Wanjun felt that this woman was more interesting than he thought. He thought of many reactions that Gu Xingyin would have, but he didn't expect her to negotiate with him like this. Of course it's the latter. I've fallen in love with you, so you naturally have to return my heart. Xia Wanjun said matter-of-factly. Gu Xingyin nodded. Fourth Master, you see, I don't have a lover right now, and you're the most outstanding person I've ever met. I do have some feelings for you. If you want my heart, come and get it yourself. Gu Xingyin looked at the time on her watch. I have an important meeting in the company today. Goodbye, Fourth Master. Xia Wanjun looked at the woman who left without hesitation, feeling very curious. He called one of his subordinates. Fourth Master, what are your orders? The man who was dressed handsomely and was about to find a beautiful woman for a romantic encounter saw the call and quickly straightened his face. Come here, help me. Chase a woman? The handsome man blinked hard, wondering if the man in front of him was possessed by some strange person. Since when did the Fourth Master learn to use such a roundabout method? Wasn't it his style to snatch anyone he fancied? No, Fourth Master had taken a fancy to a woman. Could it be that there was anyone who was unwilling? That's not right either. The Fourth Master actually took a fancy to a woman. At this moment, he remembered that a while ago, there were rumors that the Fourth Master was together with the cold and elegant CEO of the Long Corporation. Could it be? I fell in love with a woman, but she didn't like me. She asked me to chase after her. Xia Wanjun said with a calm expression. He looked at the handsome man. You're better than me in this aspect. Tell me, how can I do it faster and more efficiently? The handsome man asked cautiously. Is it that? Dragons? Xia Wanjun nodded. The handsome man thought for a moment. This president of the Long Corporation has a reputation of being cold and arrogant. Fourth Master, it's not that I want to say this, but she must have feelings for you. For a woman to let a man go after her, it's impossible to say that you don't have feelings for her. Xia Wanjun looked at him like he was an idiot. Of course I know she has feelings for me. She admitted it herself. What I'm asking is, how can I chase after her in the fastest way? The handsome man. Fourth Master, she has already said that she has feelings for you. Why are you still looking for me? In this situation, if you're a man, just go for her. Chapter 367. Xia Wanjun hung up the phone expressionlessly. Sure enough, it was useless to call others. He decided to do what he wanted. Therefore, as soon as Gu Xingyin got off work and walked into the parking lot, she was stopped by two bodyguards in black suits. Miss Long, our Fourth Master invites you over. Gu Xingyin snorted. If he wants to see me, let him come here. The two bodyguards looked at each other, as if they had never seen a woman who dared to talk to Mr. C like that. If it were someone else, they would have used force, but Mr. C had told them to be polite to Miss Long before they came. Gu Xingyin ignored them and walked to her car. She got in, but didn't start the engine. She was waiting to test the man's attitude. The answer came soon, and someone knocked on her window. Lowering the window, Gu Xingyin saw Xia Wanjun's calm face. I heard that you won't leave until I pick you up in person? Gu Xingyin took it for granted. If you want to chase me, of course you have to show your sincerity. The two bodyguards beside him had cracking expressions on their faces. So Master Fu called them here to date Miss Long? This Xia Wanjun frowned and nodded. Okay, I'll be careful in the future. He opened the door for Gu Xingyin and made an inviting gesture. Then, beautiful lady, would you like to have dinner with me? Only then did Gu Xingyin smile. My pleasure. The driver was driving. Gu Xingyin and Xia Wanjun sat in the back seat and chatted. It could be seen that Xia Wanjun rarely chatted with others like this. Considering the rumor that Mr. C liked to be quiet, Gu Xingyin understood. Long Tianrua wasn't a talkative person, and they often had a gap in their words. Even the driver sitting in front felt embarrassed for them. However, the two people involved did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. Gu Xingyin had reincarnated many times with his lover, so he was very familiar with this man's soul. Even if he was just sitting there quietly, it would be very natural for him, and he would not feel awkward at all. On the contrary, Xia Wanjun was indeed very curious about this feeling. He was a quiet person by nature, especially after the Xia family gained power. No one dared to disturb him. It had been a long time since he had experienced the feeling of being in a narrow space with others. He originally thought that he would not be used to it, but the result was surprising. He could feel the presence of the woman beside him. Her figure, her faint fragrance, and even her breath were close to him. But he didn't feel anything strange. On the contrary, he was even a little happy. Is this the feeling of liking someone? That was what Xia Wanjun thought. He felt that it was not bad. It was their first date, and both of them had a good impression of each other. Gu Xingyin did not feel uncomfortable at all because she was facing her lover. Xia Wanjun felt that his performance was good, and there was nothing wrong with it. He was very satisfied that Gu Xingyin was relaxed in front of him, which meant that she was also satisfied in her heart. Mr. C came to such a conclusion. However, in the eyes of outsiders, their dinner was like this. The two of them had almost no expression during the whole meal. They ate quietly, and there was no other communication except for two clinks of glasses. They really carried out the principle of not talking while eating. Is this really a date? The driver and bodyguard next to them was confused. Chapter 368. However, in the midst of the chauffeur's confusion, the relationship between the two slowly deepened. As for the relationship between the Long Corporation's CEO and the Xia family's fourth master, everyone went from being surprised and curious to taking it for granted. Of course, there were also some people who couldn't figure it out. For example, the person in front of them. Xia Ziqing's life had not been very good recently. His parents had become unprecedentedly strict with their son, not to mention not allowing him to enter those romantic places. Even his daily whereabouts were strictly controlled. Therefore, he had been very isolated recently. By the time he heard the news about Gu Xingyin and the Xia family's fourth master, it was already time for everyone to know. Without hesitation, he drove to find Gu Xingyin. Is this your choice? Xia Ziqing looked at Gu Xingyin with painful eyes. He really liked Long Tianrua. It could be said that he, Xia Ziqing, had never liked a woman so much in his life. But Long Tianrua didn't believe that he liked her, or his actions made it impossible for others to believe. Gu Xingyin didn't directly answer his question. Mr. Xia, in what position are you asking me such a question? I remember that I have said more than once that we have nothing to do with each other. Xia Ziqing looked at Gu Xingyin earnestly. Listen to me, Tianrua. I know that it was my fault that we broke up. I am a scum. You are free to have a new relationship, and I have no right to interfere. But fourth uncle, believe me, he is really not suitable for you. Gu Xingyin was surprised. She never thought that this scum would be so self-aware. She nodded. I am very happy, Xia Ziqing. You have finally recognized your scum. I agree with the first half of what you said. As for the second half, whether they are suitable or not, it is up to the two of them. It is not up to you to decide. Her words made it clear that she wouldn't listen to his advice. Xia Ziqing was anxious and said to her, Tianrua, you have to believe me. I will not lie to you. Do you really know what kind of person the Xia family's fourth master is? You are just a clean businessman. You only see his elegant appearance. You don't know how much blood he has stained his hands. Do you have a problem with me? A low voice came from behind him. Xia Ziqing's face instantly turned pale. He stiffly turned his head and called out to Xia Wanjun, who had appeared out of nowhere. Fourth uncle. Xia Wanjun glanced at him. It seems that your parents haven't disciplined you enough. Since when did a junior like you have the right to interfere in my affairs? Xia Ziqing lowered his head, not daring to utter a single word. Get lost. Xia Wanjun didn't want to see him at all. Xia Ziqing gritted his teeth. Fourth uncle. His unfinished words disappeared in Xia Wanjun's cold eyes. Xia Ziqing left. After his figure disappeared, Gu Xingyin said to Xia Wanjun, although he is a little naive, he did it for my own good. Don't make things difficult for him. Xia Wanjun's originally calm face had a trace of anger. Oh, Tianrua, do you think what he said makes sense? Gu Xingyin looked at the man who was obviously jealous because of her words defending Xia Ziqing. She took the initiative to take his hand. He personally admitted that he is a scum. Don't these words make sense? Xia Wanjun only felt that the feeling in his hand was warm and soft, and it easily soothed the gloom in his heart. Chapter 369. However, he still snorted. I really don't understand. Why did you fall in love with him back then? Gu Xingyin laughed in her heart and followed his words. Yes, I was young and frivolous at that time. I didn't know how to judge people clearly. Xia Ziqing was born a playboy. How could he compare to you, Master C, who was considerate and devoted? Xia Ziqing glared at him. How dare you make fun of me? Although he said that, he didn't let go of Gu Xingyin's hand. Gu Xingyin had already seen through the man's nature. How could she be afraid of his anger? She was just a little bit of a spoiled child, and the man couldn't do anything to her. The two got into the car and left in a harmonious atmosphere. After the two cars disappeared, Xia Ziqing's soulless figure finally appeared behind a huge pillar not far away. He had never seen Tianrua smile so happily in front of him. She even took the initiative to hold Uncle C's hand. It seemed that she was acting spoiled with him. He had never seen his fourth uncle so close to a woman before. He looked at his fourth uncle's angry, yet helpless expression. Maybe Uncle C himself didn't know how much he doted on Tianrua when he looked at her. Maybe he was really wrong. Uncle C really liked Tianrua. The two of them were very happy together. And he thought that the two of them weren't suitable based on his subjective conjecture. Forget it. Xia Ziqing finally laughed dejectedly. Tianrua was right. He had long lost the right to interfere in her life. Whether she lived well or not had nothing to do with him. Xia Ziqing, who was depressed, ignored his parents' ban and ran to the nearest bar to get drunk. When he returned, he found that his money had been plundered by a few gangsters in an alley. Before he left, they kicked him a few times. Damn drunkard. Wang Zhenjin, who had found a new job, happened to pass by. She couldn't bear to see him like this. She took him to a nearby hotel, paid for one night, and ordered some food before leaving. Of course, when she left, she had already recognized this person as the scum of the rich second generation who had run her over with his car. Before she left, she could not help but kick him twice. This is retribution indeed. Or even now. After kicking him twice, Wang Zhenjin vented her anger and left directly. What she didn't know was that Xia Ziqing, who had been awake for a short while, happened to see her kick. As a result, Gu Xingyin, who was preparing to fall in love with her lover, received news that the two of them were in contact again. We can even meet each other like this. Gu Xingyin was completely convinced by the plot. Was it really necessary to bring the two of them together? Gu Xingyin decided not to ruin it. Xia Ziqing's previous words showed that he had finally thought it through. As long as he stopped thinking about her, she didn't care who he was with. As for Wang Zhenjin, Gu Xingyin had already told her what kind of person Xia Ziqing was. She had also made it clear that she disdained men. If she was a sensible person, she should know that Gu Xingyin was not a threat to her. If she really didn't understand, Gu Xingyin's eyes flashed coldly. Of course, it was too early to say. Now that the two of them had just met, it was still a question whether Wang Zhenjin could successfully be with Xia Ziqing. Chapter 370. Reality proved that Gu Xingyin's premonition was right. When she and Xia Wanjun officially established their relationship, she received a notification from the system. Xia Ziqing and Wang Zhenjin were together. At this time, Gu Xingyin was sitting in Xia Wanjun's villa. In front of her were dozens of people holding gowns in their hands. The fourth master of the Xia family was swift and decisive. The day after Gu Xingyin relented, and the two of them officially established their relationship, he released the news of their engagement. No one in the Long family dared to oppose Long Tianruo's decision. Moreover, Long Tianruo and fourth Master Xia's marriage wouldn't do any harm to the Long family. The elders of the Long family were all happy to see this happen. As for the Xia family, they had to agree to fourth Master Xia's decision, whether they agreed or not. Gu Xingyin randomly picked a gown. It wasn't that she was being casual. These gowns were all custom-made by the world's top designers according to her figure. Each one of them was beautiful and unique. Any one of them would be a treasure that countless socialites would be envious of if they took it out. She changed into the gown. During this time, Xia Wanjun sat there and watched her. He was dressed as usual in a pure black custom-made suit. This man was as meticulous as his suit in some aspects. Gu Xingyin walked out. The people around her all praised her. Only Xia Wanjun stared at her for a while and frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Gu Xingyin asked, sensing his dissatisfaction. She looked at herself in the mirror. This blue gown was indeed beautiful. Xia Wanjun looked at her chest that couldn't be hidden. He didn't say anything. He just stood up and picked out a white gown. "Try this." Gu Xingyin was a little confused when she took it, but when she put it on, she instantly understood what the man meant. She couldn't help but laugh at the man's pettiness. Compared to the blue gown, this white gown was indeed conservative. As expected, Gu Xingyin walked out and saw the man's satisfied gaze. "That's good," said Xia Wanjun. Gu Xingyin did not expose his thoughts. Anyway, it was just trying on a dress. As long as the lover was happy, it was fine. It was the engagement party of the fourth master of the Xia family, and his fiancée was the president of the Long group. Basically, all the famous people in City A were present. Wang Zhenjin was now considered Xia Ziqing's official girlfriend, so of course she came along. When she saw Gu Xingyin, her eyes were filled with envy and yearning. Seeing this, Xia Ziqing suddenly asked, "You know Tianruo?" Wang Zhenjin nodded. "Yes, I used to be an employee of the Long group. The president is the idol of all the female employees in our company." She thought for a moment and added, "He's also the idol of all the male employees." Xia Ziqing was dazed for a moment as he looked at the woman who would always be the center of attention, no matter how many people there were. Once upon a time, it had been his dream to stand with Tianruo at the wedding banquet and receive everyone's blessings. Fortunately, this absent-mindedness only lasted for a moment. He came back to his senses and looked at his girlfriend, who was standing quietly beside him. "Zhenjin, do you want to have such an engagement party?" Wang Zhenjin blushed for a moment, and the grudge that had just arisen in her heart because of Xia Ziqing's gaze at Gu Xingyin disappeared. "This is too fast." She couldn't get used to Xia Ziqing's rhythm. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt something. She looked at the two people standing in the distance whispering intimately. It seemed that they had a good relationship. Very good. Gu Xingyin was relieved. This time Wang Zhenjin wouldn't blame him, right? Chapter 371. Miss Long, congratulations. Wang Zhenjin held a glass of wine and walked to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin knew the plot, so she naturally knew Wang Zhenjin's character. In fact, this girl had always felt inferior, especially after being with Xia Ziqing. She often came into contact with things she had never encountered before, which made her feel very ignorant. At this time, it was not easy for her to summon up the courage to come to her side and give her a blessing. "Thank you." Gu Xingyin smiled and clinked glasses with her. Facing Gu Xingyin, Wang Zhenjin was actually very embarrassed. She knew that Xia Ziqing was her ex-boyfriend, and Gu Xingyin had also told her what kind of person her ex-boyfriend was. In the end, she still chose to be with him, which made her feel like she had brushed away his good intentions. "Do you blame me?" She finally asked this question. In such an occasion, apart from Xia Ziqing, only Gu Xingyin could say a few words to her. Gu Xingyin suddenly laughed. "What right do I have to blame you? Xia Ziqing and I have broken up long ago. It's normal for us to look for a new relationship. Don't you see that I'm already engaged? As for you choosing Xia Ziqing in the end," she looked at Wang Zhenjin seriously, "everyone should be responsible for their own choices. Zhenjin, I'm here. I wish you happiness." Wang Zhenjin looked at Gu Xingyin. She could feel that Gu Xingyin's words were sincere. She raised the glass in her hand. "Thank you." At this time, she saw Gu Xingyin's fiancé coming over. Wang Zhenjin had heard of this man from Xia Ziqing. He was said to be a powerful figure. Even someone like Xia Ziqing was nothing in front of him. She was a little curious about how Gu Xingyin got along with such a man. "Are you tired?" she heard the man ask. "Of course I'm tired. My feet hurt. It's all your fault. You chose this dress, and now I can only wear such high heels." Gu Xingyin complained to the man. "I'll let the banquet end early." The man wrapped his arm around Gu Xingyin's waist, so that she could lean on him. Accompanied by vague words, the two figures walked further and further away. Wang Zhenjin held the wine glass and looked at it. She was actually a little dazed. The fourth master, who was said to be the invisible emperor of City A, was just an ordinary man who doted on his lover in front of his lover. In front of him, the powerful CEO of the Long Corporation was just a little woman who only knew how to whine and complain. Wang Zhenjin recalled how she couldn't let go of her feelings for Xia Ziqing. She always felt that she wasn't good enough for him, which often made Xia Ziqing very irritated. Wasn't this also a way to wear down their feelings? "Zhenjin, so you're here? You didn't tell me. I was worried to death." Xia Ziqing walked over with a worried face. Wang Zhenjin suddenly smiled. She quickened her pace and walked to the man's side. "Ziqing, I'm a little cold." Hearing this, Xia Ziqing took off his jacket and put it on her shoulder. "Bear with it a little longer. The banquet will be over soon. It's fourth uncle's banquet. I can't take you away." Feeling the warmth from her body, Wang Zhenjin narrowed her eyes in satisfaction. Okay, perhaps she should also try to completely open her heart to this man and manage their love. Chapter 372. The Xia family and the Long family had a marriage alliance. That grand engagement banquet had been talked about for a long time. There were rumors that the Xia family's fourth master loved his fiancée very much. He had originally planned to hold the wedding directly, but he felt that the time was too rushed, and he couldn't hold a perfect wedding for his fiancée, so he held the engagement banquet first. There were also people who said that the Long family and the Xia family were just a strong alliance. How could there be any true love in this kind of marriage alliance between rich and powerful families? It was just a show for others to see. Just wait and see, in less than a year, there would definitely be all kinds of gossip. However, no matter what outsiders said, it was just the two of them living their lives together. Now the fourth master, who was rumored to be ruthless and iron-blooded, was in the kitchen cooking dinner for two people. Gu Xingyin was very surprised that Xia Wanjun knew how to cook. For such a man, no one could imagine him washing his hands to make soup. Gu Xingyin actually knew how to cook, and thanks to the system, her cooking skills were not worse than the average chef. However, after being born for so long and experiencing so many worlds, she had almost never cooked by herself. Firstly, she didn't like it. Secondly, with her identity in every world, there was almost never a time when she could use it. She was very satisfied with this. However, what surprised her was that her lover, who had an extremely powerful background in every life, had cooked for her in several lives. "I didn't expect that the fourth master would actually cook by himself," Gu Xingyin said with emotion. Xia Wanjun handed the bowl of rice to her and sat down. "This is nothing. When the Xia family's fourth master was young, he was just a child who wasn't liked by his parents. His parents were married by the Xia family. After giving birth to him, the heir, they separated and lived separately. Xia Wanjun only had an empty villa and a bunch of servants with him since he was young. He started to come into contact with the Xia family's secret business when he was a teenager. In order to convince the public, he personally participated in the Xia family's devilish training. In the deserted jungles and grasslands, no one would be waiting for you with cooked food. At first, Xia Wanjun didn't even know how to start a fire. Later on, no matter where he was placed, he would be able to find food immediately and leave himself a way out. He shook his head to clear the unpleasant memories in his mind and served Gu Xingyin a bowl of soup. Gu Xingyin took it and didn't ask about the past hidden in his words. Instead, she winked playfully. "That's great. I don't know how to cook. In the future, the management of this family will be handed over to Mr. C." The corners of Xia Wanjun's lips curled up slightly, I'm happy to cook for Tianrua. Long Tianrua's past had been thoroughly investigated as soon as he became interested in her. Unlike her, she had always been the treasure in her parents' hearts, the pearl in their palm, since she was born. The biggest blow this young miss had suffered in her life was when her parents had met with an accident. She had to shoulder the entire Long family by herself. She had learned all kinds of things, but she had never come into contact with basic necessities. Before her parents' accident, she didn't need it. After her parents' accident, she didn't have the time at all. That's good, Xia Wanjun thought in his heart. Her life had been smooth sailing. There was no need for her to waste time on these worldly things. He was happy to pamper her and protect her. Xia Wanjun's woman had to be the happiest woman in the world. Chapter 373. The two of them finished dinner in a warm atmosphere, then went out for a walk hand in hand. It was late autumn, and the temperature was very low at night. A gust of cold wind blew over, and Gu Xingyin couldn't help shivering even though she was wearing a coat. Are you cold? Xia Wanjun looked at her, and put her hand into his pocket without any explanation. Gu Xingyin wasn't cold. It was just a reflex. However, she enjoyed the feeling of being cared for by her lover. The Xia family's villa was in a famous area in City A, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Gu Xingyin looked around and suddenly kissed Xia Wanjun on the face. I won't be cold if you kiss me too. She winked at the man mischievously. Xia Wanjun turned around and looked at her, but he didn't move. Gu Xingyin was joking. That man was strict, so how could he do something like kissing someone outside? Just as she was about to say that she was joking, someone suddenly pulled her wrist forcefully. She lost her balance and fell forward, right into a familiar and warm embrace. Then a pair of cold lips covered her lips. Gu Xingyin widened her eyes in surprise. Xia Wanjun held the waist of the person in his arms tightly and deepened the kiss. Gu Xingyin had never known that this man could be so passionate. A surge of passion that made one shudder came from the depths of her body, causing her to become excited. She closed her eyes and indulged herself in the passion brought to her by her lover. Her hands clung tightly to his shoulders. After a long time, their lips parted. Xia Wanjun was still holding Gu Xingyin tightly. He lowered his head and kissed her lips, which were red because of the deep kiss just now. He said, Are you still cold? Gu Xingyin snuggled up in his arms. The familiar smell and warmth made her reluctant to leave. She nodded in all seriousness. Fourth Master's embrace is indeed warm. Xia Wanjun laughed when he heard that. The Xia family's fourth master was extremely good-looking. His facial features were as if they were carved from jade, and he had a kind of elegant handsomeness. However, due to his imposing manner, no one dared to stare closely at his face. His smile made Gu Xingyin feel a trace of surprise. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but reach out and caress his face. She sighed with emotion. Fortunately, you don't smile often. Otherwise, how many love rivals would I have to get rid of? Xia Wanjun held her hand and kissed it gently. I'll only smile for you. This silly girl. Didn't she know that he had also secretly sent away countless young masters who coveted beauties? However, it was better not to tell her about this. Fourth Master Xia, who had already retracted his smile, thought expressionlessly. The two of them returned home sweetly. At this time, the two of them were not married yet, but Gu Xingyin had already been taken home by a certain man, who said, I have too many enemies. As my fiancé, it's not safe for you to live alone outside. Gu Xingyin finished showering and walked out in a bathrobe with wet hair wrapped around her long hair. She saw the man sitting on the edge of the bed at a glance. What's the matter? Gu Xingyin asked in surprise. Although the two of them lived in the same house, they did not sleep together. In some aspects, Xia Wanjun could be considered a gentleman. Xia Wanjun's gaze slowly swept over her body. Gu Xingyin had an inexplicable bad feeling. Sure enough, a certain man slowly said, You didn't think that after teasing me like that, it would end just like that, did you? Please punch the card smile. Chapter 374. Gu Xingyin and Xia Wanjun lived a sweet life. Neither of them were romantic people, but they always inadvertently showed off to others. Gu Xingyin also took the time to pay attention to Xia Ziqing and Wang Zhenzhen. It turned out that human nature really couldn't be changed. Did you say that Xia Ziqing didn't love Wang Zhenzhen? He loved her very much and was willing to marry her. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, even at the expense of turning against his family for her. But if he really loved her, not long after they were together, he reverted to his old ways and never stopped having women around him. At that time, Long Tianrua saw through him and firmly broke up with him without saying a word. With her pride, she couldn't bear to see her other half like this. The two of them were the same as in the plot, quarreling and breaking up. But this time, there was no more Long Tianrua. Wang Zhenzhen also knew very well that the root of it was her boyfriend. On the day of Gu Xingyin and Xia Wanjuan's wedding, she saw Wang Zhenzhen, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. At this time, Wang Zhenzhen was already very different from before. She began to wear fashionable clothes and put on very exquisite makeup on her face. She could already chat with those rich young ladies. Wang Zhenzhen once again held a glass of wine to bless Gu Xingyin. The smile on her face was still so sincere. "Miss Long, you are really happy. I wish you and your husband can be in love for a long time without doubts." Gu Xingyin clinked glasses with her. She smiled very happily. On such a day, such blessings were very happy to hear from any bride. Gu Xingyin glanced at Wang Zhenzhen. Although she was enjoying the scenery, there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. She knew that Wang Zhenzhen wasn't very happy. Xia Ziqing was famous for being a playboy. With a boyfriend who flirted everywhere, her life wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. But Gu Xingyin didn't say much about it. She had already told her what kind of person Xia Ziqing was. She also said that she had to be responsible for her own choices. Wang Zhenzhen didn't say much. She just said a few words to her and left. When Gu Xingyin saw Wang Zhenzhen again, there was already a little life in her belly. Wang Zhenzhen came to visit her as Xia Ziqing's wife. Yes, at this time, Wang Zhenzhen and Xia Ziqing still got together and became Xia Ziqing's wife. Gu Xingyin noticed that she was different from before. In the past, her eyebrows were full of sadness. Was completely gone now. She knew how to enjoy herself and how to dress up. She was no different from those noble ladies. She said to Gu Xingyin, "Miss Long, I really envy you. As a woman, your career has already reached a height that ordinary people can't even look up to. That's fine. Even your marriage is happier than others." She had entered this circle and seen too many seemingly united, but actually divided people. The more it was like this, the more she knew how rare people like Xia Wanjun and Gu Xingyin were. The fourth master of the Xia family doted on his wife. It was well known in City A. Gu Xingyin might not know that now. No matter who it was, their faces were full of envy and jealousy at the mention of Mrs. Xia and Long Tianrua. "Your husband also loves you very much." Gu Xingyin could only say this. Wang Zhenzhen heard this and laughed. "Ziqing? You should know better than me what kind of person he is. It's true that he loves me, but his heart is very big. He can accommodate more than just me. I'm not as decisive as you. I love him and can't let him go. Let's just continue like this." Chapter 375. Ling Yi was a recent upstart in City A's shopping malls. He had built such a huge company from scratch. Even those of the older generation had to say that the younger generation would surpass them in time. However, it was only this year that he was qualified to receive an invitation from the Xia family. Today was the birthday party of the fourth master of the Xia family's little princess. Ling Yi had never seen the fourth master of the Xia family, but he had heard of his name more than once. No matter who it was, this name would always come with a sentence. This was someone who could not be provoked. Ling Yi was very curious about him. He could go from being poor to where he was now. Naturally, his EQ was not low. He could not be an arrogant idiot who thought that he was invincible just because he had some achievements. The person who could be respected by everyone was not him. At least he was not someone who he could provoke now. Ling Yi held a glass of wine and stood in a corner in a low profile. Occasionally, someone would come to him for a toast, and he would respond with a smile. No one could find any mistake. Then he saw the little girl. The little princess of the Xia family was wearing a white high-waisted princess dress. Ling Yi could tell at a glance that the broken diamond crown on her head was made of real diamonds. This little girl was really too good-looking. Her facial features were exquisite. Wearing a white tutu dress, she was clean and beautiful like an angel. Although she was only 10 years old, it was not difficult to see how beautiful she would be when she grew up. Ling Yi looked at the lady holding the little princess's hand. When he saw her, he knew who this little girl had inherited her beauty. Without a doubt, this was her mother, the wife of the fourth master of the Xia family, the CEO of the Long Corporation. This female CEO who had made the Long Corporation prosper was also a legendary figure in the business world of City A. She had even always been Ling Yi's idol. Time seemed to treat her specially. A woman in her 30s who was almost 40 walked under the light in a gown without any trace of age. Ling Yi did not see the legendary fourth master. What? He did not even attend his daughter's birthday party? Thinking of the rumors about the fourth master, doting on his wife, Ling Yi was disappointed. This was just a rumor. That's right. It's rare to see such love in an ordinary family. How could there be such a beautiful fairy tale like love in a wealthy family? He was still letting his imagination run wild, not knowing where his disappointment came from. Then he saw the little girl seem to have seen something. Her eyes lit up, and she let go of her mother's hand and ran in a certain direction. Then, Ling Yi saw a tall man bend down and pick up the little princess who rushed in front of him. The little girl in her father's arms didn't seem to be as restrained as she was in front of her mother. She giggled, and her laughter traveled far. Ling Yi looked at the man. This was Fourth Master Xia. He had thought that the underground emperor of City A would be a man with a big belly and a beard. The man in front of her was wearing a meticulous black suit. His hair was neatly combed, and his handsome face had become more and more intoxicating under the precipitation of time. It was only when he smiled that the fine lines at the corners of his eyes revealed his age, but it also added a bit of charm to this man. This man who no one would suspect if he went out and said that he was a star model was actually the famous Fourth Master Xia. He watched as Fourth Master Xia carried his daughter to his wife's side and naturally kissed her on the cheek in front of everyone. The two of them said something, making the little princess in his arms giggle. The child's reaction couldn't lie. Only a child who was raised in a honey jar under the care of her parents could have such a smile without haze. Perhaps in this world, there really was such a beautiful fairy tale like love. Chapter 376. Gu Xingyin waved her hand to block the sword that was less than a foot away from her. With a flick of her spear, she cleanly knocked the opponent off his horse. She had been in this world for 3 days. On the battlefield, the smoke of war and hot blood. Victory! General, we won! Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and smiled. She raised the spear in her hand. Soldiers, pack up the spoils of war and return to enjoy our wine and feast. Good. Good. In this life, she transmigrated into a general with illustrious military achievements. Fu Yunjin, the 32nd generation descendant of the war god clan of the Tianyin dynasty. She was also the inheritor of the war god clan's bloodline glory. She was an invincible general. At the age of 24, she was personally bestowed the position of great general by the emperor. However, in Gu Xingyin's eyes, Fu Yunjin's life was inexplicably sad. Because Fu Yunjin was a woman, she should have been pampered and spoiled as she grew up, enjoying the love of her family. However, her mother passed away during childbirth. Her father loved her mother to the extreme and was unwilling to remarry. In order to not let the war god family's prestige fall, he actually announced to the public that his deceased wife had given birth to a baby boy and raised Fu Yunjin as a boy. While the other young ladies were enjoying the flowers, she was practicing her spear with sandbags tied to her wrists and legs. While the other young ladies were parading through the streets, she was being sternly reprimanded by her father for studying the art of war. She was able to become a great general at the age of 24. What she relied on was not the war god clan's reputation, but her own blood, tears and sweat. As a woman, Fu Yunjin had already decided not to marry for the rest of her life. She was the sacrifice of the war god clan's so-called glory. She did not want to have a child like her in the future. However, the affairs of the world were always unpredictable. In order to show his love for his subjects, the emperor personally bestowed a marriage to her. He gave the second princess of the imperial concubine to her. But how could she marry the princess? Fu Yunjin had been thinking about how to reject this marriage. However, she did not expect that the second princess, who was famous for her beauty, would be such a vicious woman. She had been in love with Fang Mingyu, the eldest son of Zhuge Manor, for a long time. In order to escape this marriage, she had actually bribed an assassin to assassinate Fu Yunjin when he was returning with his army. No matter how powerful Fu Yunjin was, he was only one person, not to mention that the other party had come prepared. The sharp blade was smeared with a poison that could seal a marquee. She was poisoned. Even if she used her inner force to suppress the poison in her body, she couldn't hold on for long. Just like that, a famous general of a generation lost his life in the hands of a vicious woman. Until Fu Yunjin's death, other than her father, old General Fu Yingjie, no one else knew that she was a girl. When she was born, her father did not like her. When she died, she was also hated by another woman. Gu Xingyin silently received the memories provided by the system. Fu Yunjin shouldn't have died. She was a rare military genius of the Tianyun dynasty. According to normal development, she should have led her hundreds of thousands of cavalry to expand the Tianyun dynasty's territory and create the strongest iron and blood empire. Therefore, Gu Xingyin came to her. At this time, Fu Yunjin had just led the army to defeat the invasion of the neighboring country. Tomorrow, the army would be reorganized and returned to the capital. "General, everyone is waiting for you," Deputy General Zhang Yuan shouted from outside the tent. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and replied with a smile. "Okay, I'll be right there." Chapter 377. When she lifted the curtain and went out, she found that there was already a bonfire outside. The soldiers were all holding wine bowls in their hands, waiting for her. "General, today, we have so many people, we must make you drunk." "Yes, today we must make you drunk. Come, General, let me give you a toast." Gu Xingyin smiled and opened a jar of wine. She picked it up and put it in her hand. She laughed and said, "Good, you guys, you've already discussed to make me drunk. You all better pray that I fall today, otherwise tomorrow on the military field, we'll all come one by one." Her words made many people show a look of lingering fear. Deputy General Zhang Yuan saw this and laughed. "Don't be scared by the general. We have so many people, can't we make him drunk?" Everyone burst into laughter. Gu Xingyin cooperated and downed the wine in her hand, bowl by bowl. She liked this kind of atmosphere. She was going back to that annoying capital city tomorrow. If there was wine today, she would get drunk first. "Your Highness, General Fu's army is almost at the city gate." Jiang Shua's personal maid reported Fu Yunjin's movements to her. She thought that Her Highness was restless because she was about to see her fiancé, but she didn't know that Her Highness's thoughts were completely different. Jiang Shua's handkerchief was tightly clenched. She was still a little scared. She knew that her imperial father trusted Fu Yunjin and even praised him as an important minister of the country. If her imperial father knew what she did, Jiang Shua's face turned pale. No matter how much she was doted on, her imperial father could still cripple her. For a moment, she had the intention to cancel this assassination. But in the next moment, she thought of her cousin. If Fu Yunjin didn't die, how could she have the chance to marry her cousin? Thinking of this, she slowly calmed down. "Fu Yunjin, you can only blame yourself for being an eyesore and blocking this princess's path." At this moment, Gu Xingyin was very clear that the killer sent by second Princess Jiang Shuha to kill her was hidden among the people who lined the streets to welcome her not far from the city gate. However, Fu Yunjin's reputation as the #1 martial artist in the current dynasty was not for nothing. This time, Gu Xingyin was well prepared. Jiang Shua's plan could not be realized. "Here it comes." Gu Xingyin's ears twitched. She leaned back on her horse and dodged a stray arrow that came out of nowhere. At the same time, the silver spear that had never left her hand drew a cold gleam under the sunlight and went straight for an assassin that was pouncing on her. The long spear shot out like a cold bolt of lightning, swift and unpredictable. It was a one-hit kill. At the same time, the deputy generals and guards behind her also took out their weapons and surrounded her. From their actions, it was obvious that they were prepared. "Leave him alive. This general wants to see who dares to be so daring in front of the imperial city's gate." Gu Xingyin's eyes were cold and murderous as she coldly shouted. Yes, Princess, something bad has happened. The maid who was sent out to investigate the situation ran in with a panicked face. Did it succeed? Jiang Shuhe stood up and tried to suppress the joy in her heart. She asked with a worried face, "What happened?" The maid said, "Replying to Your Highness, this servant just heard the news. When the deputy general returned to the city, he was attacked by an assassination." Jiang Shuhe thought that it was as expected. She quickly continued to ask, "What about the general? Did something happen?" Chapter 378. The maidservant looked at the anxious expression on the princess's face and thought that she was worried about the safety of General Fu. She quickly smiled and said, "Your Highness, don't worry. Who is the deputy general? He is the new god of war of our Tianyan dynasty. How can a few rascals hurt the general?" Jiang Shuhe only felt that her heart was empty. This was a failure? Seeing her in a trance, the maidservant thought that she was still worried about Fu Yunjin. She smiled and comforted. "Your Highness, don't worry. General Fu has already entered the city to meet His Majesty. It is said that he also detained a few assassins. You don't have to worry." "What did you say?" Jiang Shuhe was shocked. "He actually caught people. Those are trash." The maidservant was a little confused. Jiang Shuhe closed her eyes. "Leave. This princess wants to be alone for a while." The maidservant was a little puzzled, but she still obeyed her orders and left. After the maidservant left, Jiang Shuhe slumped on the chair. Now, she could only hope that those people's mouths were tight enough, and that they would not give her away. Gu Xingyin entered the palace to meet His Majesty. The emperor also heard that she was attacked when she entered the city. In order to show his concern for his beloved official, the emperor was furious on the spot. Not only did he order a strict investigation, he also bestowed countless treasures to comfort Gu Xingyin. After the emperor and his official appreciated each other, Gu Xingyin prepared to return home with a large wave of rewards. Following a eunuch outside the palace, Gu Xingyin's attention was attracted by a carriage. There were not many people who could use this carriage in the palace. Moreover, looking at the regulations, this was not the style used by the women in the harem. While she was thinking, the other side had already passed by her. At this time, a gust of wind blew over. In a flash, Gu Xingyin saw half of a pale face. Seeing her gaze, the little eunuch who was leading the way whispered, "General Fu doesn't know. That is His Highness Prince Rong's carriage. His Highness Prince Rong just returned to the palace not long ago. At that time, you were leading the troops to war." Gu Xingyin withdrew her gaze and smiled. "Thank you for answering my doubts." Prince Rong, Jiang Huan, was a character that had only been mentioned a few times in the original plot. Prince Rong was the Empress Dowager's youngest son, and Jin Shang's biological brother from the same mother. Ever since he was born with a congenital deficiency. At that time, even the imperial physicians did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to survive. At that time, it was the senior monk of Fayan Temple who suggested that Prince Rong be placed in the temple to be raised and prayed for Buddha's protection. The Empress Dowager believed him and sent Prince Rong to Fayan Temple as a lay disciple. She didn't expect Prince Rong's body to get better day by day in the temple. Now, although his body was still weaker than ordinary people, his life was no longer in danger. Jin Shang pitied his younger brother's weak body, and the age gap between the two was very large. He almost treated Prince Rong as his own son, doting on him even more than his own son. When it came to favor, Prince Rong was at the top of the list in the imperial city. When it came to the people who could not be offended in the imperial city, Prince Rong was often the first to be mentioned. Gu Xingyin, however, slowly smiled. "I didn't expect to see my lover on the first day I returned to the capital." On the other side, Prince Rong Jiang Huan was also thinking about Gu Xingyin, who he had just met. He had only heard of General Fu's name before, but had never seen him in person. Today, he saw him for the first time. He never expected that this young general would look so attractive. Chapter 379. He looked over from the carriage and saw the young general in silver armor standing in the shadows. The blood-red cloak added a hint of sternness to his face, and his eyes were rarely exquisite. This General Fu, who was famous for his military exploits, was not as tall and burly as he had imagined. Even from a man's point of view, his figure could be said to be somewhat thin and weak. The curtain fell, and the young general's figure disappeared in front of him. Jiang Huan didn't know why, but there was a surge of disappointment in his heart. His thoughts drifted uncontrollably. If this General Fu were to change his clothes and walk in the crowd, he would most likely be mistaken as a pampered young master from a wealthy family, right? King Rong entered the palace to see the emperor. The old emperor was very tolerant of this brother, who was 2 rounds younger than himself. He personally got up and helped Jiang Huan up. The two were just chatting when Jiang Huan suddenly talked about Gu Xingyin. When I entered the palace just now, I saw General Fu. The emperor had always had a good impression of Yun Zhen. Hearing this, he became interested. Xian, this is the first time you've seen Yun Zhen, right? What do you think? Xian was King Rong's name, which was personally given to him by the late Empress Dowager. Jiang Huan said with a smile on his face. I just took a quick glance, and only felt that this General Fu was like a jade tree in front of the court. He was beautiful. If it weren't for the battle robe he was wearing, he wouldn't look like a general on the battlefield. Instead, he looked like a rich young master. The emperor laughed. Xian, don't say this to Yun Zhen. He hates it when people talk about his appearance. Jiang Huan was still smiling. Appearance is bestowed by one's parents. Xian thinks that beauty is something that makes people happy. General Fu is obsessed with it. The emperor helplessly glared at him. You have been cultivating in the temple for so many years. Even when you speak, you sound like a monk. Jiang Huan smiled, but didn't say anything. After Gu Xingyin left the palace, she returned to the Fu residence. She didn't even change her clothes and went straight to visit her father, old General Fu, who was now idle at home. Greetings, father. Gu Sheng's expression was solemn as he bowed in a formal manner. Old General Fu looked at his expressionless daughter in silence. After a long time he said, Get up. He withdrew his hands from his sleeves without leaving a trace. After Gu Xingyin got up, she stood quietly to the side. The father and daughter looked at each other in silence. After an unknown amount of time, Gu Xingyin felt that the atmosphere was too awkward. Finally she said, Father, do you have any instructions for me? If there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Old General Fu treated his daughter as if she was a businesswoman, but he couldn't hide the disappointment in his heart. This child, she had finally given up on him. Gu Xingyin saw that he didn't say anything, so she took it as a yes. She bowed in the direction of her father and walked out of the door. After Gu Xingyin left, old General Fu turned to the old housekeeper, who had been standing beside him, and asked, Changfu, do you think she hates me? The old housekeeper was silent. General, you are thinking too much. As the only person who knew about the relationship between the father and daughter, the housekeeper had seen it for many years. Sometimes, even he felt that the general was too much to the young miss. But he was just a servant. What could he say about the master's affairs? Chapter 380. As expected, the assassins who tried to kill Fu Yunjin did not mention second Princess Jiang Shuha. They all knew that if they said it, they would die. If they didn't say it, they would die. If they didn't say it, at most they would die. If they said it, with second princess's ruthlessness, perhaps their entire family would be buried with her. Because they were unable to find out the mastermind, the emperor once again felt that he owed Fu Yunjin. Another large wave of rewards flowed into the general's residence. However, the more the emperor expressed his appreciation for Fu Yunjin, the more flustered second princess Jiang Shuha became. The emperor liked Fu Yunjin so much, he would definitely not agree to her breaking off the engagement. If she stubbornly refused, perhaps the engagement would be cancelled in the end. But if that happened, imperial father would definitely dislike her. Even the Zhuge manor would not be willing to marry a princess who was not liked by the emperor. Princess Shuha was unwilling to marry someone she did not like, but she could not give up her honor. After thinking about it, she could only go find Fu Yunjin. When Gu Xingyin heard that the princess had arrived, he was shocked. Logically speaking, as fiancés, it was not appropriate for the two to meet. But since the princess did not care, as an official, He naturally had to go and welcome her personally. Your humble servant Fu Yunjin greets your highness. Princess Shuha did not ask him to rise. Instead, she looked Fu Yunjin up and down. Her heart was tied to her cousin, Fang Mingyu, and she had never looked at her fiancé in the eye. Now that she finally looked at him carefully, she actually felt a sense of shock. Gu Xingyin did not need to go to the battlefield, so she naturally did not need to wear that armor. Today, she wore a snow-white robe embroidered with silver patterns, and a light green gauze overcoat. Her long hair was tied up with a white jade crown. Her lips were red, her teeth were white, and her face was like jade. In all fairness, in terms of appearance, Gu Xingyin's appearance was not inferior to the handsome young master of the Zhuguoduke manor. General Fu, please rise. Princess Shuha's face was red, and even her voice was much gentler. Gu Xingyin stood up as instructed. She lowered her eyes and stood at the side, waiting for Princess Shuha to speak. I came here today to tell you that I already have someone in my heart. If you know your place, you should go and tell my father to cancel our marriage. Princess Shu, he said as if it was a matter of fact. Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. She thought the princess would say something. It was actually this. For Fu Yunjin to die in the hands of such a woman was indeed an injustice. She had a look of disbelief on her face. After a long while, she said to Princess Shu He, Your Highness, our marriage was personally bestowed by His Majesty. Disobeying the imperial edict is a great crime. This humble subject does not dare to offend His Majesty. She looked at Princess Shu He, who raised an eyebrow, and was about to explode. Without waiting for her to speak, she continued, Of course, Your Highness, the princess is of noble birth, and deeply favored by the emperor. If you are not willing to marry this subject, the Holy One will not force you. She wanted to get rid of the marriage, but didn't want to be a bad person. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Did she really think everyone else was an idiot? She didn't even deal with her for the assassination, and Princess Shu He still had the face to come. Princess Shu He didn't think that a general like Fu Yunjin would have so many tricks up his sleeve. He didn't fall for her provocation at all, and pushed the matter back with just a few words. She purposely said those words to anger Fu Yunjin. If he couldn't bear her humiliation and did something impulsive, she would have a way to put the blame on him. Chapter 381. Of course, if Fu Yunjin could not bear the humiliation and ran to imperial father to ask to cancel the marriage, that would be the best. Most generals had explosive tempers, and Princess Shu He did not think that the famous General Fu would be an exception. But she had not expected that this General Fu would be able to endure this kind of humiliation without any change in expression. Was he a man or not? Princess Shu He looked angrily at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin easily saw the meaning in her eyes. She really wanted to say to this princess, Sorry, you guessed right, I really am not a man. Princess Shu He glared at her for a moment, and then said angrily, Fu Yunjin, this princess will say it here today. I will not marry you. You are just a toad eating swan meat. You want to marry this princess, that is wishful thinking. After saying this, she carefully looked at Gu Xingyin, hoping to see something from her expression. But Gu Xingyin's expression did not change. She said faintly, Your Highness, your words are useless to me. My Fu family has always been loyal to the emperor. The Fu family has no reason to go against His Majesty's decree. If your Highness is not willing, you can directly report to the emperor. After saying this, she looked at Princess Shu He, whose eyes were even wider, and continued, This official is wholeheartedly for the country and originally had no interest in love. But the emperor's decree has already been sent. If there are no accidents, this official will be on the same level as your Highness and treat each other with respect. The meaning of these words was, You look down on me, Fu Yunjin, and I, Fu Yunjin, do not like you that much. But because the emperor has decreed the marriage, I will treat you respectfully after marriage. You do not need to think about anything else. Princess Shu He's face turned green from her blunt rebuttal. Her chest rose and fell for a moment before she said coldly, Such a clever and eloquent General Fu. This princess only knew that you were skilled in the art of war. But I did not expect General Fu's tongue to be sharper than a normal woman's. Gu Xingyin smiled faintly in response. There is no harm in having more skills. Your Highness is too kind. Princess Shu he left angrily. The reason why she dared to be so brazen was that she was relying on the man's pride. As for being despised by his fiancée in front of his face, and wanting to break off the engagement, any man with even the slightest bit of courage would not spread the news. But she was wrong. Fu Yunjin was not a man at all. If she could break off this engagement with the princess, not only would she be able to solve a huge problem in front of her, but she would also be able to use this as an excuse to refuse other marriages in the future. The price of such a good thing was only to be laughed at behind his back for a period of time. To Fu Yunjin it was nothing. Gu Xingyin went out in a good mood. She had to think carefully about how to bring up this matter to the emperor. Of course, the marriage had to be called off, but he couldn't be the one to say it first. Princess Shu he wanted to pull herself out of this so easily? Not so easy. Gu Xingyin was dressed like a rich young master, strolling casually on the street. She was born beautiful and dressed luxuriously. From time to time, her eyes would wander around and she would smile, making many young ladies blush. I say, who are you? You dirted this young master's clothes, and you think you can get away with just an apology? Do you know who this young master is? An arrogant voice entered Gu Xingyin's ears. She looked towards the direction of the voice. Chapter 382. The young master who spoke was dressed gorgeously and held a folding fan in his hand in the middle of autumn, looking elegant. Gu Xingyin looked at him carefully. He could barely be considered handsome, but his complexion was a little pale, and his steps were unsteady. It seemed like he spent a lot of energy on his beauty. Gu Xingyin felt that he looked familiar. Opposite him was an inconspicuous carriage covered by a green cloth. The coachman was a bearded man who was over 40 years old. The moment Gu Xingyin saw this man, her heart quivered. Her intuition as a military general told her that this was an expert. At this time, the young master spoke again. Do you know how much this young master's clothes cost? People like you won't be able to pay it back in your lifetime. The clothes he was wearing were just a little dusty. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. Gu Xingyin heard the people around her talking. So pitiful. Why did he have to meet this devil incarnate? Yes. It's most likely that this person lost money in the casino again. He's feeling unhappy now and bumped into the muzzle of the gun. Sai, who asked his father to be the marquis. When Gu Xingyin heard this, she suddenly remembered who this young master was. The famous hedonistic son of the Marquis of Baocheng, Huojiabao. Gu Xingyin thought of this famous hedonistic son because this guy didn't abstain from meat and vegetables. There was once when he saw Fu Yunjin dress casually. He actually had those shameful thoughts and wanted to use force on her. The result was obvious. Fu Yunjin gave him a fierce beating, then ordered people to strip him down to his underwear and sent him back to the Marquis of Baocheng's residence. Marquis Baocheng's heart ached terribly, but after knowing what this unfilial son had done, he still had to bring gifts to the general's residence to apologize. Gu Xingyin felt that it was a misfortune for Marquis Baocheng to have such a son. Her heart skipped a beat, and she was about to step forward when she heard a clear voice coming from inside the carriage. Since it was my servant who dirted young master's clothes, we are in the wrong. At the same time, the curtain of the carriage was lifted by a white hand from the inside. The joints of this hand were clearly defined, and the shape of the hand was graceful. In addition to the clear voice from before, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of appearance the young master sitting in the carriage had. This hand was holding an ingot of gold. The coachman took the gold from the person in the carriage and handed it to the young master of the Baocheng Marquis. This young master, I am truly sorry. This is my young master's apology for dirtying your clothes. An ingot of gold. No matter how expensive Huojiabao's clothes were, it was enough for him to buy another set. But at this moment, Huojiabao was not looking at the ingot of gold. Instead, his gaze was fixed in the direction of the carriage curtain. Young master, I don't want your gold. Let your young master have a meal with me, and this matter will be over. How about it? Huojiabao thought of the jade-like hand from before, and felt his heart itch. The coachman's expression changed when he heard those words that seemed to have a deeper meaning. Gu Xingyin saw his finger move, and knew that he was about to make a move. She sighed in her heart and stepped out from the crowd. "Young Master Hua, long time no see. How have you been?" When Hua Jiabao saw her, his expression changed. Chapter 383. "You. Why are you here?" Hua Jiabao would never forget the pain this handsome man brought to him. Gu Xingyin laughed heartily. "What are you talking about, young Master Hua? In this imperial city, does anyone who wants to come here have to get your permission?" Hua Jiabao naturally didn't dare to agree. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. "It's been a long time since we last met. Seeing young Master Hua again, this scene seems a bit familiar." It would have been better if she didn't say it, but once she did, Hua Jiabao's face became ugly. This wasn't a familiar scene. Didn't he also have a sudden lust when he was beaten up? Hua Jiabao sternly said. "Fu Yunjin, don't think you're invincible just because you know some martial arts. It's not your turn to meddle in this young master's affairs." Gu Xingyin put away her smile and slowly said, "That's really unfortunate. What if I say that today, I want to meddle in this matter?" Hua Jiabao angrily glared at her. Gu Xingyin smiled and looked back. In the end, Hua Jiabao weighed the pros and cons, and felt that the difference in strength between the enemy and himself was too big. He coldly snorted and said, "Fu Yunjin, you better pray that one day you don't fall into this young master's hands." Gu Xingyin didn't take these words to heart. Generally, these kinds of people who only dared to say harsh words usually didn't have a second chance to make a comeback. Seeing that the matter here was settled, she lifted her leg and wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, the coachman opened his mouth. "This is General Fu. Our young master is grateful for General Fu's help and specially invited young master to come to the carriage for a chat." Gu Xingyin's footsteps paused. She was also a bit curious as to what kind of person could have such an expert as a coachman. After thinking for a bit, she boarded the carriage. She didn't know how shocked the coachman was at this moment. No outsider had ever boarded his master's carriage. So it's His Highness Prince Rong. Gu Xingyin was really surprised. She didn't think that the person inside the carriage was her lover. If she had known earlier that it was him, she wouldn't have needed to worry about the driver's retaliation in the future. However, Hua Jiabao dared to covet her lover. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt that she had let Hua Jiabao go too easily just now. Jiang Huan was surprised to see that she recognized him. "General Fu, have you seen me before?" Gu Xingyin smiled. "I was fortunate enough to meet your highness in the imperial palace." Jiang Huan smiled. "Thank you for your help, General." Gu Xingyin was a little embarrassed. "I didn't know it was your highness in the carriage. My actions were unnecessary." Jiang Huan didn't know why he treated General Fu so differently. He had been cultivating in the temple since he was a child, so he was very indifferent to people and things. Ever since his mother passed away, other than his only brother, his emotions were almost unaffected by other people. However, he had only caught a glimpse of General Fu that day and remembered him in his heart. Today, when he found out that General Fu was the one who helped him out outside, his heart was filled with an inexplicable joy. Even before he could react, he invited General Fu into his carriage. He put away these thoughts and smiled at Gu Xingyin. "My name is Xian. General, you can call me Xian." Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment and said, "Xian." Jiang Huan smiled. Gu Xingyin said with some embarrassment, "The family of a general is not so particular. Xian can just call me Yunjin." Chapter 384. Jiang Huan nodded and said with a smile, "Seeing Yunjin today, I feel like old friends at first sight. I've buried a few jars of good old wine in the manor outside the city. Yunjin, do you want to come along?" Gu Xingyin replied with a smile, "If there's wine, there's friends. There's no reason not to go." The carriage moved forward slowly. Gu Xingyin sat for a while and saw Jiang Huan's tired face. She remembered that her lover's body was not well in this life and asked worriedly, "Xian, do you want to rest for a while?" Jiang Huan did not try to be brave. Perhaps the road outside was not very smooth, but the bumps in the carriage were uncomfortable. Jiang Huan's carriage did not look conspicuous from the outside, but it was well equipped. To accommodate his body, there was even a small couch covered with a thick blanket. He looked at Gu Xingyin apologetically, then closed his eyes and leaned against the couch to rest. Gu Xingyin could finally look at her lover openly. Jiang Huan's appearance was very good. His eyebrows were just right. But he was different from her delicate appearance when she was dressed as a man. He had the kind of elegance that belonged to a man. However, Gu Xingyin looked at Jiang Huan's pale face and hesitated. Jiang Huan's health was indeed not very good. Gu Xingyin contacted the system. Why can't I choose the abilities of my previous world in these worlds? The system replied in a methodical manner. Host, the level of each world is different. For example, the apocalypse, the magic world, and the blood-breed world that you've experienced before are all high-energy worlds. They can't be compared to the low-martial world that you're in. Similarly, the abilities of the high-energy worlds are beyond the range that the low-energy worlds can withstand. The host cannot use them in these worlds. Gu Xingyin was speechless. If that's the case, these abilities are actually useless. The high-energy worlds had their own power system, so the effects of those abilities would naturally be weakened. And the low-martial worlds could not use those powerful abilities. The system was just painting a pie in the sky for her. The system said, please understand. If the abilities of the high-energy worlds are used in the low-energy worlds, it will easily trigger a warning from the laws. In serious cases, it can even cause the world to collapse. A long time ago, when there were no ability restrictions, the system saw a host use forbidden magic in a low-energy world and directly destroyed a country. Gu Xingyin, I'm just complaining. As a human that was created, compared to normal humans, there were still some differences. For example, her understanding of the system's methods and desire. The desire of normal people would get bigger as they get more things. This was not shown on Gu Xingyin. The system was also quite satisfied with Gu Xingyin as its host. It had never seen such a carefree host. Gu Xingyin suddenly asked, System, is there any medicine that can strengthen the body? The system glanced at the sleeping Jiang Huan and answered, yes. A white light flashed, and a small porcelain bottle appeared in Gu Xingyin's hand that was hidden in her sleeve. The system's product, a health pill from a high-class world. Put it in water, and it will dissolve in the mouth. It's colorless and odorless, and has no side effects. Gu Xingyin squinted her eyes happily. As long as it did not involve the storyline characters, the system was very tolerant of its host. Chapter 385. The carriage traveled for an unknown period of time before it finally stopped at a place. Gu Xingyin got up and lifted the curtain. Sure enough, she found that they were no longer in the imperial city. She came back to her senses and glanced at Jiang Huan. She found that he had opened his eyes and sat up. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say much. She turned and got off the carriage. Jiang Huan followed. This was a large manor. Seeing that it was clean and tidy, and the flowers and trees in the courtyard were neat and tidy, Gu Xingyin knew that there were people serving here all year round. Jiang Huan led the way for Gu Xingyin. This was the manor that Imperial Mother chose for me. She liked the quiet environment here, and there won't be any disturbances. The carriage driver was not by their side. He should have driven the carriage somewhere. There were people in the manor leading the way for the two. Someone had already prepared fresh fruits and snacks in the courtyard. The two sat down and rested for a while. Jiang Huan ordered, "Go get my good tea." He smiled and said, "It's not good to drink wine at this time. When night comes, I'll tell them to prepare delicacies to go with the wine. Yunjin and I will drink under the bright moon." Gu Xingyin smiled and nodded. As Xian says, the tea was quickly served, but it wasn't brewed. A servant brought over a small stove and a set of utensils. It looked like Jiang Huan was going to brew the tea himself. Jiang Huan felt that the more he looked at Gu Xingyin, the more he liked her. This feeling of familiarity at first sight was really rare. The servants are vulgar. I'll brew a pot of tea for Yunjin. Gu Xingyin smiled as she watched him brew the tea step by step like moving clouds and flowing water. She held it in front of her. Try it. Gu Xingyin picked up the teacup and gently sniffed it. Then she took a sip. Her eyes couldn't help but brighten. Is this the best Yuqian Longjing tea? Jiang Huan was just expressing his respect for his good friend. He thought that Gu Xingyin, a general, would not be too particular about the way of tea. He did not expect that the other party would be able to taste what kind of tea it was. His surprise was mixed with an even greater pleasant surprise. It was like when you originally thought that someone was a friend who could get along with you, but after interacting with them, you realized that not only did they feel like old friends at first sight, but they could also admire the flowers and discuss the moon with you, and they had more in common. Jiang Huan nodded. I didn't expect Yunjin to have studied tea as well. Gu Xingyin didn't answer the question directly. Instead, she smiled and said, not only do I know that this tea is top-notch Yuqian Longjing, but I also know that the water used to make this tea is mountain spring water. Jiang Huan looked at Gu Xingyin, as if he was looking at a rare treasure. Gu Xingyin chuckled inwardly. Fu Yunjin indeed didn't know much about what he found, but Jiang Lingjin, Liang Qinyu, and the system did. She was very willing to have more in common with her lover. The two sat and chatted for a while. After that, Jiang Huan took Gu Xingyin to tour the vicinity of the manor. When the sun set and the two returned, Jiang Huan already wished that he could hold his new friend's hand and become sworn brothers with him. How could there be someone in this world who was so compatible with her? No matter what topic they talked about, he could always think of the same thing as her. Of course, Gu Xingyin deliberately did this, but it was undeniable that she and Jiang Huan got along very happily. Someone had already set up steaming hot dishes and aged wine in the courtyard. Jiang Huan dismissed the servants and took Gu Xingyin's hand. Come Yunjin today, I must drink with you until we are drunk. Chapter 386. It was said that they would not go home until they were drunk. In fact, with Jiang Huan's body, it was destined that he could not really get drunk. Even if he was willing to risk his life to accompany his confidant, Gu Xingyin could not watch her lover risk his own body. So the situation became that Gu Xingyin drank one cup after another, while Jiang Huan only held the wine cup and occasionally took a sip. Occasionally, he drank too much and was glared at by the half-drunk Gu Xingyin, so he had to put down the cup with a bitter smile. In the blink of an eye, there were 2 empty jars on the ground. Jiang Huan looked at Gu Xingyin, whose face was already a little red. He knew his own collection of fine wine. All of them were good-aged wine. If ordinary people could drink one jar, they would be praised for their good alcohol tolerance. Gu Xingyin had drunk 2 jars in a row. He stopped Gu Xingyin's hand from continuing to open the next jar. Yunjin, that's enough. Gu Xingyin was actually a little drunk at this moment. Her eyes were gleaming as she glanced at Jiang Huan with a mixture of joy and annoyance. She dodged his hand and deftly opened the wine jar. Jiang Huan only felt that there was an indescribable charm in her eyes. It was a kind of flirtatious feeling. Immediately, he realized what he was thinking. He could not help but laugh and shake his head. It seemed that he was drunk. Yunjin was a man. How could he have such eyes? While he was thinking, Gu Xingyin drank a few more cups of wine. Seeing that he did not speak and was deep in thought, Gu Xingyin blinked and giggled. What's wrong with you, Xian? Is there something on your mind? Jiang Huan came back to his senses and looked at Gu Xingyin, who was drunk. He shook his head and smiled. No. Gu Xingyin half supported her head. She looked at him with blurred eyes and said, You don't have anything on your mind, but I do. Jiang Huan originally thought that she was joking, but who knew that Gu Xingyin would continue? I don't want to marry Princess Shuhe. Jiang Huan's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Only now did he remember that the person in front of him was not only his confidant, but also his niece, Princess Shuhe's future son-in-law. He didn't know why, but there was an uncomfortable feeling in his heart. Obviously, Fu Yunjin was young and promising, and Princess Shuhe was a natural beauty. The two of them were a perfect match, and he should be happy for his good friend. Hearing Gu Xingyin say that he did not want to marry the princess, Jiang Huan's rationality told him that he should stop Gu Xingyin from continuing. However, he personally poured a glass of wine for the person opposite him and asked, Why? The familiar scent made Gu Xingyin completely let down her guard. Her head was dizzy, and she couldn't even hear the system's call. She subconsciously answered Jiang Huan's question, Why? Because I can't marry her. And? She looked at Jiang Huan and said with a smile, Princess Shuhe doesn't like me. She personally came to me and asked me to ask His Majesty to cancel the engagement. She thinks that I'm a fool. This is defying the imperial edict. Seeing Gu Xingyin say such words without a care in her eyes, Jiang Huan felt a surge of anger in his heart. His niece, who was famous in the capital, actually did such a thing? This was simply a blatant humiliation to his face. He felt that it was unfair for his good friend. He must be very upset about this, right? If he wasn't drunk, he was afraid that Yunjin would bury this in his heart for the rest of his life. He thought about it, and felt that he should say something to his imperial brother. Chapter 387. Jiang Huan didn't care what Gu Xingyin meant when he said, "I can't marry her." He thought that Gu Xingyin said that because the princess didn't like him, and he didn't seem to have any feelings for Shuha. Gu Xingyin raised her head and downed another glass of wine. She supported her chin and stared at Jiang Huan. Jiang Huan knew in his heart that the person sitting opposite him was a drunkard, but he still didn't hide the unnatural look in his eyes. "Yunjin, what are you looking at?" Gu Xingyin was very honest now. She answered whatever he asked her, looking at Shirin. "Jiang Huan," Gu Xingyin continued, "Shirin is so good-looking." "Jiang Huan." Gu Xingyin continued to speak. She narrowed her eyes and lowered her voice mysteriously. She said to Jiang Huan, "Do you know that my name is actually not Fu Yunjin?" "Jiang Huan." "Then what is your name?" Gu Xingyin looked proud. "I won't tell you." "Guess." "Jiang Huan." Well, it was not normal for him to answer a drunkard's question seriously. Then he saw Gu Xingyin, who was opposite him, lying on the table obediently and sleeping. Jiang Huan sighed helplessly. Suddenly he laughed to himself. He called the servants to clean up, and walked in front of Gu Xingyin to help her up. He could have asked the servants to do it, but he didn't know why he didn't want others to do it. Fortunately, although Jiang Huan's body was not very good, he still had the strength to help a person. Moreover, Yunjin not only looked thin and weak, but when he held her in his arms, Jiang Huan realized that the person in his arms was unexpectedly slender. Gu Xingyin moved a little uncomfortably. She felt the familiar scent, so she didn't break away. She buried her head in Jiang Huan's neck. Her warm breath sprinkled on his sensitive skin. Jiang Huan only felt inexplicably hot. Could it be that he was drunk too? Jiang Huan could not help but laugh. He helped her to the guest room that had already been prepared and placed her on the bed. He removed Gu Xingyin's shoes. Just as he reached for his belt, the man on the bed suddenly opened his eyes and stared at him coldly. His hands were not careless at all. Jiang Huan only felt a huge force pass over him. Before he could react, he was already lying on the bed. The man who was lying unconscious on the bed was leaning over him, looking at him with murderous eyes. One of his hands was around Jiang Huan's neck. Jiang Huan only needed one glance to confirm that if he acted rashly, the other party would really kill him. He laughed bitterly and tried his best to relax. "I just want to take off your robe, so you can sleep more comfortably." The person on top of him stared at him for a while, then suddenly closed his eyes and collapsed on top of him. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin was not heavy. However, the weight of her entire body still made Jiang Huan unable to see clearly. Jiang Huan looked at the person who was sleeping soundly. Only then did he realize that this person had not woken up at all. The series of actions just now was just a conditioned reflex. Thinking of this, a bitter feeling surged in his heart. He was so vigilant even when he was sleeping. He really did not know what kind of life this good friend of his was living. He looked up and saw that the person on top of him was lying obediently in his arms. Half of her face was buried in his chest, and the other half of her face was revealed. How could there be any trace of the murderous aura from before? Feeling the softness and slenderness of the person in his arms, it was hard to imagine that such a person was actually the ever-victorious general, whose name shook the entire Tianyin dynasty. Chapter 388. Jiang Huan had also drunk a few glasses of wine. Now that the alcohol had kicked in, and with the warm body in his arms, he inexplicably did not want to let go. In a daze, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next day, Jiang Huan was the first to wake up. He had paid attention to his health all these years, and waking up early had long become a habit. However, the heavy feeling from his body made his mind a little muddled. His Highness King Rong had some small habits, such as not liking others to get close to him. What was going on now? He opened his eyes and saw a certain figure half lying in his arms at first glance. After a night of sleep, Gu Xingyin's clothes were a little messy. At this time, her collar was slightly open, revealing the white skin under her neck and a line of delicate collarbone. Looking up, it was her rosy and soft lips, which were slightly open, and a little bit of her ruddy tongue could be seen. It seemed that she had slept well, and the expression on her face was quite satisfied. She looked like a satisfied kitten. Jiang Huan's face unconsciously carried a trace of a smile. He moved and found that half of his body was almost numb. He could not help but let out a hiss. This sound woke Gu Xingyin up. Her mind was still a little muddled. She opened her eyes in a daze. Before she could see clearly who was beside her, she habitually reached out to hold the other person's waist, half closed her eyes, and kissed him on the face. Then, she felt the person beside her stiffen. Gu Xingyin then realized that something was wrong. Her muddled mind finally cleared up this time. She suddenly sat up and looked at Jiang Huan, who was still in a daze after being kissed by her. She showed an awkward smile and explained dryly, "Xian, I'm really sorry. I thought you were." Halfway through she paused. Who did she think it was? Xiao Wanjun. My snow wolf. Gu Xingyin finally found someone she could say. The snow wolf was a wolf with snow-white fur. Fu Yunjin had raised it since it was young, and they were very close. Jiang Huan's face was still a little stiff. Hearing her explanation, he nodded and said, Yunjin should not have such a habit in the future. In his mind, he was thinking that he must not let Yunjin rest in the same room with other people in the future. His habit of hugging and kissing people when he woke up was not good. Gu Xingyin felt a little embarrassed. She quickly got out of bed and said, I'm still a little dizzy. I'm going out to get some fresh air. Then, she went out, leaving Jiang Huan sitting on the bed alone, thinking about that kiss. Jiang Huan's face blushed as he recalled the warm and soft touch from before. Ever since he was young, he had been cultivating in the temple because of his poor health. The number of women he came into contact with had always been few, and he only had a smattering of knowledge about the matters between men and women. Later on, when his health gradually improved, for the sake of his health, the Tai advised him to control himself in the bedroom. Muhu was not in a hurry to find a Wang Fei for him. Later on, Muhu passed away, and he observed mourning for 3 years. Thus, the dignified Prince Rong, who was already in his 20s, had not experienced the taste of men and women. Recently, the emperor had mentioned that he would bestow him with a few beautiful women. Jiang Huan had some resistance to this, and thought of ways to refuse. But now, he suddenly felt that he should get a wife. He actually felt something, because of a kiss from his good friend. This was really thinking about it, his face turned red again. Chapter 389. By the time Jiang Huan finished tidying up and came out, the two of them had already forgotten about the kiss in the morning. Gu Xingyin stayed at Jiang Huan's manor for another day before saying goodbye. After all, she was an official and did not have as much freedom as Jiang Huan, a wealthy prince. Jiang Huan did not keep her any longer, and only said that he was going to the palace, and could go with her. It was still the same inconspicuous carriage with the same unfathomable coachman. After entering the city, Gu Xingyin got off the carriage, and said goodbye to Jiang Huan before heading to the Fu residence. Jiang Huan went straight to the palace. He was still thinking about the words Gu Xingyin said to him when she was drunk. Since Princess Xu he dared to say such things, there was already a gap between the two of them. Even if they became husband and wife in the future, it would be a pair of resentful couples. He wanted to persuade his imperial brother to change his mind, so of course, he could not speak rashly. Today, he would go and sound him out first. Gu Xingyin went straight back to the residence. When the servant guarding the door saw her return, he said while packing, General, the old general has orders for you to see him when you come back. Gu Xingyin nodded. He changed his direction, and walked toward the main courtyard where old General Fu lived. This child greets father. Gu Xingyin bowed properly. You still know to come back? Where have you been these 2 days? Old General Fu looked at his handsome daughter and asked sternly. She disappeared for 2 days without any reason, and did not even send a message back. Did she not think that her family would be worried? This child only went to see a good friend. Gu Xingyin replied calmly. Old General Fu saw her nonchalant attitude and became angry. Don't forget your identity. You must be careful when making friends. Gu Xingyin knew that he was emphasizing that she was a girl and did not want her identity to be exposed. To be honest, as a transmigrator who was on a mission, she was familiar with the storyline. Naturally, she knew that this old general had feelings for his daughter. However, he had always been stubborn and would never speak softly. His words of concern sounded like he was lecturing her. But while she could know and understand, Fu Yunjin could not. Hearing his father's words, Gu Xingyin suddenly laughed. He raised his head and looked straight at his father. Father, you worry too much. Your son has been in the army for so many years and has still been doing well. Father, don't worry. I won't let the war god family's reputation be ruined by me, Fu Yunjin. Old General Fu was speechless when he saw the mockery in his daughter's eyes. He had always known that this child held a grudge against him. Yes, for the sake of the so-called glory of the family, he had selfishly decided her life. Ever since she made the decision to give birth to a young master in the general's residence, her daughter was destined to never be able to lead a normal life. His face was dejected. You hate me. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change. I wouldn't dare. It wasn't that she didn't dare, but she didn't dare. Gu Xingyin retreated. Old General Fu was alone in the room. He stood there for a long time and carefully took out a scroll from a secret compartment in the study. The scroll slowly unfolded. On the slightly yellowed paper, there was a beautiful woman with a sweet smile. Looking carefully, this woman's appearance was 70% similar to Fu Yunjin's. The only difference was that the woman in the painting had a gentle smile, while Fu Yunjin's eyebrows had a bit more heroic spirit. I was wrong. I was really wrong in the past. His rough hands slowly rubbed on the paper. No one could hear the old man's regret. Chapter 390. I heard that you invited Yunjin to your manor? The emperor took a sip of tea and asked Jiang Huan with a smile. There was nothing to hide about this kind of thing, so Jiang Huan nodded. The emperor was surprised. I remember that your manor is very precious. Back then, I wanted to borrow it and use it, but you refused. Why are you so generous this time? Jiang Huan glanced at the emperor and said bluntly, Last time you wanted to use my manor for those vulgar foreigners, and I entertained my friends there. How can it be the same? The emperor was surprised. His brother looked gentle, but in fact, he was very proud. He rarely looked at ordinary people. How long had he and Yunjin known each other? Jiang Huan saw the emperor's meaning and nodded. Yunjin and I hit it off at first sight. He remembered his purpose of entering the palace and couldn't help but ask, Brother, I heard that you arranged a marriage for Yunjin and Shuha? The emperor nodded and said with a smile, That was several years ago. My princess should be matched with such a young hero. The emperor thought of something, and his eyes were full of smiles. He said, Yunjin insisted that he didn't make a great contribution and didn't have the face to marry the princess. Fortunately, Shuha was willing to wait. Otherwise, my grandson would have run away. Jiang Huan frowned. According to Yunjin, Shuha wasn't in a hurry to get married. It was probably not because she was considerate of Yunjin, but because she didn't want to marry. He wanted to say something, but when he saw the emperor smile, he swallowed his words. It seemed that the emperor was very optimistic about this marriage. Forget it, I'll wait and see. When I find some evidence, I'll talk to my brother. Jiang Huan bid farewell to the emperor and was about to leave the palace. When he was halfway, he remembered that there was a black peony in the imperial garden that seemed to be blooming at this time. He couldn't help but turn and walk in that direction. Cousin, look at that peony. The beautiful woman in red looked at the tall and slender man beside her with an affectionate gaze and said with a smile. The man looked at the peony carefully and suddenly turned to the woman and said, I think that peony is beautiful, but it's far from cousin's celestial beauty. These rude words made the woman blush. The two of them chatted affectionately for a while before slowly walking into the distance. Only when the two figures disappeared did Jiang Huan walk out with an ashen face. He knew both of them. One of them was Princess Xu He, who was engaged to Yunjin, and the other was the crown prince of Zhugua Manor. Looking at the two of them, It was clear that they had been in love with each other for a long time. No wonder Yunjun said those words to him when he was drunk. No wonder Shuha didn't want to marry him. Jiang Huan recalled Gu Xingyin's drunken mumbling in front of him. He couldn't help but feel that it wasn't worth it for Gu Xingyin. Even though he didn't have much affection for this niece of his, he also felt a little unhappy. He no longer had the mood to admire Imo Mutin. He turned his head and walked out of the palace. Your Highness, where are we going? To General Fu's residence. The blue curtain carriage rumbled in a certain direction. Gu Xingyin was practicing her spear in her courtyard. Fu Yunjin had a habit. Every time he was in a bad mood, he would practice martial arts in the courtyard. It seemed that he could use this to vent all the resentment in his heart. She and old General Fu parted on bad terms, so she was naturally in a bad mood. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.